All right, hello everyone. I am Mr. Shadow. Today is January 18th. I'm going to be giving breakdowns of a variety of different content styles, all through the eyes of an American national who has lived abroad, places like Russia, Brazil, Japan. I've been to every continent in the world, and I have really tried to deconstruct my sort of American centralist mindset. And so I'm going to bring that mindset to you, help people hopefully travel and get outside of the US to uh, eliminate American imperialism. That is a primary goal of mine, as well as just give people all over the globe a peek into the mind of an American, the way we, or at least the way that I personally am viewing my home country's politics and actions. Today's video, and the very first one of its kind, is going to be on Greenland, tariffs, and the World Cup. These are all things that are closely related in my mind, as the US is signaling that they want to acquire Greenland. I don't think it's as much a signal as it is just open and honest fact. This has come directly out of the president of the US's mouth. Um, and so what we're going to do is we're going to frame this thing. We're going to talk some facts, and then we're going to give opinion. We're going to analyze it because that's what we do on this channel. We start with facts, and then we analyze to give people some ideas on how they could potentially help or navigate the world with that information. I'm open to comments. Feel free to hop in there with facts or opinions. This stuff is important to talk about. Now, what has factually happened in recent days? Again, today's January 18th. Tariffs have been announced on European allies. That's coming from the US. And we'll overlay right here exactly what those tariffs are and the time period that they start, because this is official now, that this has happened. And of course, there's an explicit linkage to Greenland. That this is the reason, this is the primary reason that these tariffs are being laid out. This is not conjecture. This is facts. Again, laying out facts here. Now, of course, I wouldn't expect different, but European officials, governments, people, they are rejecting this premise. It is not being received well, at least initially. And I don't think that is something that's out of the norm or unexpected. So what has happened is that European leaders have paused some trade talks. Again, fact, and we'll outlay exactly what those what the pause to that means, and exactly what trade talks are being paused. And the other thing is, I think every time we have these discussions, there is always going to be a reaction in terms of political leaders, right? Presidents, those in power will react one way to show a political front, and then there will also be a reaction of the people. And I think you can find that the differences sometimes in those to be interesting, because they do sometimes differ, and then oftentimes they're in unison. And to me, that also matters. Well, protests have been happening in Greenland and Denmark, and so clearly aligning with European leadership, they have no interest in allowing the U.S. to acquire Greenland. So again, these are all facts. None of that is conjecture or opinion. Now, what I think is also interesting is some of the long-term logic that I would assume leadership in the U.S. has, and it's the reason why they're attempting to acquire Greenland itself. Now, if you're not aware, there is certainly an Arctic defense positioning that Greenland would afford the United States. Now, there are already treaties in place that allow the U.S. to operate and set up defense operations in Greenland. We can certainly overlay those, exactly what they are, and talk those. These are already in place. So interesting that the president would be attempting to further this by an acquisition of the country itself and not just using the existing treaties. Why is that? That is the $1 million question. And I don't think it's something that we need to dig too deep in. Let's discuss it because I think the most obvious is rare earth and strategic minerals. Currently, the U.S. Needs these for defense purposes, and supply chain wise, they get them from China. A lot of them. China is certainly the leader here, and so long term, the U.S. acquiring a country that is so rich in these strategic minerals would give the U.S. an opportunity to sort of decouple itself from that present supply chain situation. So I think it's, again, reasonable to state that this is a long-term plan, decade plus, in order for them to be able to position themselves to decouple themselves from China. And that I don't think is an unfair goal if you're the US, but certainly the way in which they are going about it is largely imperialist in nature. Look, one thing that this is absolutely going to do, and this is why I say it's not perhaps in the US's best strategic interest to go about it in the way of tariffs, is because this is certainly going to fracture some allegiances, right? It's not just intent, right? Allies don't respond well to coercion, typically, or historically, for that matter. Tariffs historically push diversification, not obedience. And we can look into the ways that this is true. In my mind, you're more so allowing Europe to hedge towards autonomy, move away from the US, in the same way that this could be viewed as the US attempting to decouple itself from China's supply chain of those rare earth minerals. This is the way in which the US is going about this. It will encourage Europe to decouple itself from the US as a supply base because it's fracturing that alliance. It is largely a blackmail tactic. At least this is the way that European leaders are viewing it. Here's what some of them had said recently. Now, how would they hedge towards autonomy? Well, the most obvious, I think, would be reaching out to some of those other major global supply chains, Russia, China. Now, something that I find interesting is that as we move into, I think, what will be a very long negotiation phase, I think we'll see the future of the US and Europe's alliance take one of two major directions. Either Europe will capitulate and sort of bow down to the US, giving them access to Greenland, or they will do what we spoke about previously, which is move further away from that US umbrella, reaching out to some of the other uh, large nations. And I think European citizens across a wide variety of nations have a vested interest in the direction that the EU takes. Now, one way that I feel the common man can influence this decision is an interesting connection: the World Cup. There are soft power and protest options that I think would have heavy influence on the way that EU leadership responds. Because the World Cup is an economic injection and a legitimacy uh, option for the countries, the people who will be flying into the United States and supporting the US economy. Fans equal tourism, which equal at times sponsorships, and ultimately support. I want that to be clear. To go to the World Cup, the upcoming World Cup in the US, is to lend your support to what is currently happening geopolitically with the US attempting to acquire Greenland. You are injecting your money into the US economy. That will help the positioning of American leadership. It decreases the leverage held by European leadership. Always follow the money. Always follow the money. If Europeans oppose these policies, then don't continue to participate by lending your finances to the US government, to the corporations who sponsor these events, who ultimately sponsor the policies of the US government. You cannot protest policy while financially celebrating and standing behind it. The two do not align. So, message to all those planning on going to the upcoming World Cup event in the US. If you are protesting in your country now against this, please put your money where your mouth is. It's important. I suggest it. And I'm an American. I think there is a call. I am calling for civil pressure. Boycotts are historically legitimate tools. They have been in US internal politics for a very long time. They clearly have been in European politics. I would argue that in many cases, Europeans protest better than Americans at large. There are pockets of American communities who tend to be very well equipped to protest. Shout out Black folks. But at large, Europeans probably doing it better. So use that. It's encouraged, at least by myself. Now, if you're selling tickets, you're not attending, you're not traveling, again, this is putting that political pressure through finance. And it's putting that pressure on your own government to act because they have a vested interest in the World Cup succeeding. It's not just the US and the US economy who would succeed if the World Cup as an event largely succeeds. And it's called the World Cup. This is one of the biggest events in the world. Every nation has interest in the World Cup succeeding as an event. So by putting pressure on each nation, by them seeing sales plummeting, it shows your governments exactly where the people stand on the issue and forces their hand to some extent. To some extent. Now, before we close here, I want to leave viewers not unsettled, but more empowered. I think I've given some ways in which I've established you do have power, right? None of us are helpless in this. But history won't ask what we want. We have to actually go out there and take it. It will record what we fund and tolerate and what we've normalized. So protesting, yes, continue it, but also continue it in a way that is formal, not just performative, but formal and effective. Now, I hope you like this video and the content. I will continue with content much like it, and comment, subscribe if you do enjoy it. Please feel free to fact check me on information. I always encourage folks to research yourself. Do not take everything I say as the truth. So I welcome, normal, respectful conversation around the topics, and I hope you have enjoyed it. Until next time, I'm Mr. Shadow. Take care, folks.